Hey, mans! Welcome to CCCX. I don't even know what it stands for. I'm sure the word crumpet is in there
Cross-country
somewhere.
comics, my friend.
Oh, there you go.
Cross-country comics.
Welcome. My name's Rob, aka Spedsy. I'm filling in for Shane because Shane has found himself trapped underneath a pile of Kickstarter calendars. Yes, we could help him get out from under them, but no, instead we'll steal his show out from under him. So I'm here with Dustin, aka the man behind Greed and the listener. How you going, Dustin?
Oh man, it's great. I just ate some stuff. I'm ready to hang out with you guys.
Sweet. And then we've got the man who's battling and bustling and running marathons and all that stuff he does. It's Leigh Chalker. What up, dog?
Hello. How's everyone going this morning?
Good, man.
And then, all bright and ready to go.
Yeah. We've got a guest waiting in the wings, a man by the name of Dave Vries. He has written on Grimjack, Green Lantern, Black Lightning. He's the guy who, when Marvel acquired the Phantom, they said, could you make that shit work for us? And what else? I would say his career highlight is probably working with me on Torn in the Southern Squadron.
I love it.
We'll bring him on now. No further ado. Here he is, Dave Vries.
Guys,
What up, Dave?
Hello, Dave.
Good morning, Dave.
Man, I had no idea that you had worked on Grimjack. So before we get started, I have a small story about that particular book. As a kid, I wasn't allowed to read it, right? In my youth, I wasn't allowed to read the book. But I got my hands on this issue where he was in a bar with these dinosaur people, like killing these dinosaur people in this bar. And I just think it's really funny that I literally had a conversation not 3 nights ago about that particular issue of the book because I have an anthropomorphic dinosaur book I'm writing right now. So I thought that was just the coolest thing in the world. And here you are talking about, here is Rob's telling us that you worked on the book. I think that's great. That's incredible.
well, it's weird you should say that because the story that we did was a Munden's Bar story. And John Ostrander was a good friend, and he liked the Southern Squadron stuff that we were doing and Gary's Jackaroo. So we actually had the Southern Cross, the Night Fighter, who were 2 of the Southern Squadron characters, and the Jackaroo wander into Munden's Bar by mistake. They thought they were walking into a nightclub in King's Cross, and somehow the portal had popped them into. For those who don't know, Sinishore and the Grimjack world is sort of this world where every reality sort of intersects with it. So it was kind of a cool idea. And they see all the weird people dressed up from different alien areas and assume that they're in a gay bar. And I think it was actually an anthropomorphic dinosaur that picks a fight with the Southern Cross. And the Southern Cross cleans up the bar with everybody. But the Night Fighter, in the storyline, the Night Fighter regards the Southern Cross as a porf. He always sort of refers to him as a porf. It's all very homophobic back in the 80s. And at the end of it, at the end of the story, when the Southern Cross has absolutely demonstrated his total power and domination of the room, the Night Fighter's response is, "Yeah, I still think you're a puff," and that was sort of the end of it.
Right.
And that actually came from a real event that occurred where I was at a cricket match, and cricket, of course, is the correct version of baseball. And I was watching at the SCG, Sydney Cricket Ground. Craig McDermott, he was this precise thing happened. He was fielding at what would be the equivalent of the outfield, Dustin, in just in front of where we were standing, and he was being heckled by a New Zealander who was, because Australia was playing New Zealand, who was they were batting at the time, and this New Zealander was just calling him a puff and screaming at it, casting questions on it. And so McDermott then, at the end of that over, he then went into bowl. And basically in cricket, each bowler, like a pitcher, gets 6 deliveries, and then they change ends. And so the bowler then, will have 6 deliveries, and the next bowler will have 6, and they go backwards and forwards. So he goes out, and I think he got two wickets for virtually no runs, which in one-day cricket is a staggeringly good outcome. And then when he sort of strode back valiantly to the outfield, there was just a silence, and everybody was sort of waiting for this Kiwi to pipe up, and the Kiwi yelled out, "I still think you're a poof to McDermott," which was, I just thought this, the refusal to back down. And so while it was sort of very homophobic, I thought it was also very funny. And so I just borrowed that heavily in that Munden's Bar story.
That's so much fun though. But what do we say about cricket, Leigh? Because I don't know shit about cricket. What do we say about it every time we start talking about it?
Oh, we always bring in a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles reference there, mate. Like the old Raphael Casey Jones, like cricket. And no one understands cricket. But look, I love cricket. Cricket's one of my favorite sports.
Yeah, but you have to understand crumpet to understand
the crumpet. That's it. Yeah,
that's
you
right.
and your bloody crumpet.
And I don't know shit about either, so it's all good. I'm really excited that we have Dave here. I think it's incredible the projects you worked on. I'm a huge Green Lantern fan. Like I said, I think that bar scene set my youth up for that. This is that comic book that I want to read that I know I'm not supposed to. And it's really, really cool. You know what I mean? And so I think when I set out to put out my third IP, I was like, man, I need to have bar fights like that, because that was awesome. The style was awesome. If you guys haven't seen the way the lines are done in Grimjack, it has a very stylistic fashion to it. They're very, here they are. They're real heavy lines. Beautiful, beautiful book. But you don't see artwork like that in modern comic books. It's a style that we don't see anymore. A lot of people would call it almost grimy, sandy style. I love it. There you go, Dave. Dave is awesome. So there's all kinds of cool stuff to be seen in this book. So if you get the opportunity to check out Grimjack, by all means, pick up Grimjack. It's a lot of fun. But yeah, so what are you working on right now, Mr. Vries?
I'm actually working on the Southern Squadron again after all these years. For those who are not familiar with the characters, they were very popular in the 80s in Australia. When I first started publishing or having work published in America, the Southern Squadron were repackaged with new materials. So actually there's a lot of stuff that actually got into the American comics that have never been seen in Australia, which was fun. And that was sort of in 1990. They were actually created in 1983. So 2 years from now, they'll have their 40th anniversary, which is giving away my age somewhat. And what I remind myself of is that in 1983...
Giving away the fact you're a legend, mate. Doing it for that long. Bloody hell.
Well, when I look back, I mean, 1983, at the time, Marvel had only existed for like 21 years or something. It was like a 21-year gap between what we were doing and the early days of Fantastic Four and Spider-Man and so forth. And now I'm sort of looking back and going, good God, that distance, which seemed like forever when I was that age, is almost doubled now by how long the Southern Squadron's been around, which is really frightening. Dark Nebula is another character. I think, well, Dark Nebula actually beat the Southern Squadron out by 1 year, so that was 82. So it's been a while. So I'm actually working with Tad, who created the Southern Squad, the Dark Nebula, on a Dark Nebula Southern Squadron crossover story for next year to come out, and that's retconning his very first story where the Southern Squadron will be in it. That will probably be published by both Reverie and Cyclone. I'm not sure the full side of that, but I know Gary Della from Reverie is quite interested in seeing that, and the other Gary Challoner, we'll just have to see. But Dark Nebula is being published by Cyclone just naturally, and the Southern Squadron is now going to be published by Reverie. So the project I worked on with Rob was that's really kind of the first time we've seen them since, with the exception of one comic which happened in 5 years ago now. Gosh, that seems a long time ago. Decay, the Decay comic number 19, which was like where they had a Southern Squadron story, Dark Nebula story, Dar and Dill, all of the sort of the classic characters from the 80s and 90s were done in this sort of horror comic. And so in preparation for that, I did quite a lot of work on rebooting the characters. So when I stopped publishing the comics, I think it was around about 93, 94. At that point, I was doing so much stuff for DC, Marvel, Dark Horse and that, they paid a lot better. That was simply the case. And all of the Southern Squadron material that we had in the pipeline had been used. And so I just didn't have time to create any new material. And I eventually got sidetracked into, well, still doing it, film and television. And as a result of that, I never got back to doing the Southern Squadron. So they've kind of just sat in limbo a little bit, although Gary's been bringing them out. He sort of brought back the Jackaroo stuff, and that all tied into the Southern Squadron stories a lot. And Tad did a series of coloured versions of all of the old Southern Squadron and Dark Nebula material. So all of that sort of was coming out during the noughties and the teens of this century. And so last year, with the whole COVID thing, as you know, a lot of comic people started to use this type of technology to communicate with each other. And as a result of that, I discovered that, the new way of publishing, you can actually, it is now viable to, print comics again and distribute them again. So the first instant was just working with the guys that I was communicating with. So like I've been talking to Darren Close about a Killaroo and Southern Squadron crossover.
That's awesome. I need that.
Yeah, which was, I've got the storylines sort of worked out, but I've just been buried with a lot of university marking at the moment, so I haven't been able to get onto that. So that's hopefully going to come out sometime next year. I think that should do quite well because Killaroo seems to be getting a head of steam up at the moment, and definitely. I'm getting the impression that Southern Squadron, they've been away long enough now that people are kind of interested in seeing them coming back. But the first one that will be coming out is, of course, the one I'm doing with Rob, which was Gary Della got us together and said, I was actually given a choice. He said, you can either just write it all yourself or you can work with one of our writers. What would you prefer? And I said, I'd kind of like to co-write. I haven't done a lot of that in comics, although when I worked with Gary Challoner on the Southern Squadron and the Cyclone stuff, there was always a lot of, cross-communication, cross-contamination, call it what you will. Every lunchtime, when we're at the pub, we would sort of talk stories. So, there was a lot of work that happened long before you actually sat down and wrote it. And when I worked with Glenn Lumsden, there were very few times where I just write a story without his input. He and I would meet every morning, have a couple of coffees for breakfast and discuss storylines and so forth. So I thought it might be fun to sort of work with someone else. And so Rob and I teach film and TV, Hayden, and also, believe it or not, comic books. Getting back to with Rob, it was a really fun process to go through. I think we probably spent more time discussing philosophy and just sort of principles of writing, and the plot and the dialogue, the actual script itself, happened incredibly quickly, but there was a very long period leading up to that. Just finding the voice of the characters was really, really interesting. And one of them was a character that when Rob was writing the dialogue and we were sort of piffing the stuff backwards and forwards, I was reading it and I just couldn't hear it in my head. It didn't make any sense to me. And we were trying to create this little, like Tinkerbell-like fairy who was actually more like Arnold Schwarzenegger, a real kick-ass character. And we sort of started off thinking that he was this mobster who had watched too many movies that had got through this portal into his realm, and that he'd probably seen too many Jimmy Cagney films. but the voice wasn't Jimmy Cagney, but we both wanted it to sort of have those smart ass quips that you get from Schwarzenegger, like let off some steam, that sort of stuff. And I was just every time I read it, I was going, I can't get this. And finally, I just said, "Can you read it out?" And then Rob just started reading it, but he was doing it with a Cockney accent. And I was going, "That sounds like Vinnie Jones." And he said, "Yeah, that's it." And I said, "Oh, okay, so we're not really Jimmy Cagney at all. We're Guns and Geezers." And so we both literally went away that evening and watched Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels. But as a result of that, I then went back and reread it and went, yep, now I can hear it. It works. And I think we just put the word geezer in his first line of dialogue just to tune the ear of the reader.
Right.
But yeah, it was things like that were really interesting. So how did you find the experience, Rob? It was sort of an interesting way to go, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, you saying you teach comics, that's what it was like. It was, I'd written comics before speaking to you, but having spoken to you, I've now changed how I do everything. It was like going to school. We would spend 2 to 3 hours on the phone, like almost every Saturday morning for a couple of months. Drove my wife crazy. She was very much looking forward to it being done. But it was daunting at first. Like, you only have to read the man's resume to be intimidated. But he made me feel very welcome, very heard. And, any disagreements we had were very, like, we reached compromises and everything. And it was just a lot of fun. And I was trying to keep it probably more serious than needed to be. And when Dave said, let's just, like, why does the villain have to be a man in a suit? Why can't we just go crazy? And, that castle that we've got, why can't it be floating? And just like suddenly, the handcuffs were off. We were doing anything we wanted. And the villains are crazy. They're so cool.
You tell me there's a chook in a suit?
No chooks in this one, but everything but. Dave, for those who don't know, can you tell us what a big deal Cyclone was back in the day when you guys all first teamed up and became this juggernaut of Australian comics?
Yeah, it was an interesting period. It actually was remarkably short-lived. When at the time it felt like it went for a long time, but it really got its start in January of 1986. This was when Richard Ray did that convention where Jim Steranko came down and Will Eisner came down, and Will Eisner had an incredible impact on everyone. This was the same time that Fantastique was launched at that comic convention, which was Dustin. This was a horror comic which was our version of The Seduction of the Innocents. They actually got a $25,000 grant from the state government, which in today's money would be probably 5 times that,
Right, yeah, sure.
And they had every shock jock demanding their heads. They were banned in 3 of the states. We've only got 6, so that was half the country. So that was we don't have the First Amendment here, so it was. Cyclone came out at that same time, along with a lot of books. Reverie also came out around that era, and Fox Comics, and I think a lot of them were launched sort of in the in the expectation of this convention occurring, and so that sort of triggered everyone's interest. Southern Squadron and Cyclone did particularly well because we did a couple of things that were quite deliberate. The first one was this was before the days, obviously, of social media, but we sort of adopted a social media approach. So the letters, the editor column, the editorials, we regarded those as incredibly important in a way of communicating with the reader. And so we adopted all of the Stan Lee approach that he did. I'd actually read about Stan's whole idea of publishing, and the man was a genius at finding a way to connect with the readers and making them feel like it was their comic, that they were part of the creative process.
Sure.
Things like, getting people to offer suggestions and the no prizes and all of those things, I think were really important. So we did the same. We invited people to, offer comment. And of course, if we didn't like what they said, we just simply ignored it. This is one of Gary's ones after the period in question, where it was sort of redesigned for the 90s. But the early Cyclone was made up of 4 different titles. There was the Southern Squadron, another title which was called the Southern Cross, which was like a Golden Age character, had the same name as one of the Southern Squadron characters. Because the Southern Squadron had appeared a couple of years beforehand, Tad and Glenn Lumsden, who were working on that title, actually said, well, maybe we've changed the name of the character to the Southern Star. And I said, no, leave it. They're separated by 40 years of history, so that no one will confuse them. And maybe we can do a crossover tie-in, which we ultimately did do years later, where events that occurred in the past and in the now sort of clashed with each other, and was sort of a fun story. And the other 2 titles were the Dark Nebula and the Jackaroo. And very quickly, there's the first Southern Squadron book, which is actually Cyclone number 9. We did the same thing as the Amazing Spider-Man. We just kept that grew out of the Amazing Tales. We did the same thing. We kept the numbering going and just swapped the masthead. Right. The reason why they were really popular was partly because of that relationship with the audience. Also, they were capes, superheroes. And believe it or not, Australia has had, very, very few superhero titles over the years. The Southern Squadron and the Dark Nebula are probably the 2 that are most closely remembered, that fall into that traditional superhero costume. In fact, none of them actually wore capes, but still that feeling.
Right. Now, did you guys go into, so as a kid, mind you, reading in the late 80s and whatnot, we would get, we'd go to the back and we'd read editors' notes, and we'd read the messages sent in by fans. Did you guys do stuff like that?
Absolutely.
How cool
That's
is
one
that?
of the things that I used to love, mate, when my dad used to bring his comics home. The strange part is I used to read the letters to the editor and stuff so much that I could actually recognize names further down the track that were like serial letter writers. Do you know what I mean?
Cool.
And, they'd throw suggestions out, or I liked this, I didn't like it. And I think I agree with Dave. There is a real sense of community with your reader and audience and stuff when they can get involved in, I guess, the process. I mean, not necessarily, there's no wrong ideas, some are better letters than others and that, but you're still engaging and they feel like they're part of the community. And
absolutely.
I mean, I fell out of comic books for a while during the, 2000s, because I just felt it just got very sterile and very clinical, and it didn't, nothing was engaging. And then over the last, I suppose a few years, I've noticed that those little nuances have started popping back into comic books. And, with, as Dave said, with sadly COVID hitting, and, people finding the time to go back and revisit their stories, or, other people's titles and stuff. And with the technology that we've got today, I mean, I apologize for being basically silent for the first 20 minutes, but Dave, to me, man, you and Tad were 2 guys that I used to read your comics, grab them off the newsagent shelf, mate, when I'd go with my dad. So I'm a little bit, my anxiety was up during the week when Shane said you were popping on the show. I'll put it to you that way. So, I do apologise about that, but I just enjoyed immensely listening to your story earlier on. And I do want to say, man, you are, to me, one of the pioneers. I know there's, other of your group and friends and stuff, like Gary Challoner and varying other people and stuff, but you really, and, and back in the 50s, 60s, let's not forget all of those guys either. But for me, as a young man, a young boy growing up, you and Tad were the 2 that from an Australian creator. Like, I didn't know I was a creator then, but just someone that loved comic books. I actually thought, like, man, you know, there's these guys and Australian guys doing this stuff, you know, and
the fact that we then went on and did the American stuff maybe also gave people hope that, okay, so that's, I'm not sure if this is totally true, but I have a feeling I was the first Aussie to work for DC and possibly the first Aussie writer to work for Marvel.
I think you're hitting that right on the head, to be honest with you, with DC especially. I'm fairly certain that's the case. I'll look that up in a minute. I'm definitely fairly certain about that. But I find it interesting, something Rob said a moment ago and something Leigh said as well. It's something that we talk about. Mostly it's me talking about it, though. So it's interesting to hear both of them have mentioned it. You have imposter syndrome in this industry, and you have it in film as well. When you come in and you're like, man, this is a dude, right? This is a dude, you know, one of the guys that sits at the adult table, you know what I mean? So when you go in as a creator and as a writer or an artist or whatever have you, you have these guys that are larger than life to us. You know, the generation that was before us that was smashing it before we started getting into it, you know, the guys that we came up with. Like, it was interesting to me that Rob mentioned, like, it was like going to school. You know, it was like going to school for me. And it's very telling and very interesting, because there are people that walk out in this industry and they have this huge head on their shoulders and they're like, I'm the man, I'm the man, I'm the man. But if you look at these guys like us, and I talk from experience with myself, I go into a room with guys like you. I worked in film when I was a kid, and it really, those guys didn't blow me away, right? I mean, it was cool, you know, meeting Michael J. Fox or hanging out with, you know, coming across Jim Carrey and having a conversation or whatever, what have you, you know. But working in the comic industry and meeting the guys that you actually gave a shit about their opinions is a whole different animal. You know, it really is. And I think it's exciting that we're able to get to have conversations with you guys. You know what I'm saying? There's a term for it, like the old watch. Okay. So you come in and you've got these guys that have been doing it and they've been holding the fort forever. You know, and you come in and you're like, man, I've been watching you. I've been reading you for so many years of my life. And, you know, even artists and whatnot, we walk in and I'm like, holy cow, are we allowed to have conversations? You get these guys that are like, hey, let's go have a beer. And you're like, oh, is that okay? Am I allowed to go have a beer? You know what I mean? Am I allowed to sit with the crew? And I find it very human and very telling that all three of us, between Rob, Leigh, and myself, know that feeling. You know, and it's really, really cool. So yeah, we salute you, man. We salute you, the things you've done, you know, all the industry that you've paved your way. Like, I talk to these guys.
Trailblazer, mate, for Australian comic books.
Absolutely. You know, we talk about the fact that
the luck of the era that we just happened to be doing it when there'd been this really nothing had really happened for most of the 70s. There was the odd one that popped out from time to time. We just happened to be right place, right time. I think that was fortunate.
I think that's a factor, though. But your talent is something that stands above in itself. You know, you can't disregard those things. We can all be like, yeah, look, I was in the right place. They were looking for somebody. You know, my uncle ended up getting a hotel and marrying a pretty chick in St. Thomas because he met her on a plane. You know what I mean? That's cool. Right time, right place, whatever. The man had no talent whatsoever. Love him to death. No talent. You know what I mean? But there are you guys that come out, and it doesn't matter. I have this belief when I talk about those guys that have pioneered this stuff. I have this belief that it doesn't matter where you were at any given time, you would have found a way to be in this industry. You know what I'm saying? And I think it's very cool.
Oh, yeah. I mean, just showing up and doing it is 90% of it. And look, we were very lucky. And it's interesting what you say, because I experienced this myself. The first time I went to San Diego Con was, I think it was in 88. And it was no bigger than most of the Australian cons are now. And they had 3 different coloured ID badges. You had a creator, industry, which was usually like comic shops and so forth, and then the punters. And the punters would have made up a third. So probably there were as many creators there as there were just mug punters showing up. And you all kind of sort each other out by the colours, but nobody there was no hierarchy. So you would be sitting in the bar, and basically the first time I went was with Gary Challoner, and we would literally just find the bar closest to the event. We would get up late because we didn't get to bed till like 5 a.m, and then we just used the con as an opportunity to wander around and identify guys. One of us would go seek the blokes, and the other one would just hold the place in the bar, and we would just turn the bar into an Aussie hangout. And we met so many people there. This is where we met guys like John Ostrander, Mike Grell, who came to Australia. He was introducing us to everybody left, right, and centre, and virtually everybody who has been a major creator in the last 30 or 40 years. I got to meet at these places, and there was no sense of. I mean, maybe it's because of the Dundee thing. It had just come out, and so the Aussie accent was cute as the Dickens, and maybe that was it. But
probably scared you had a big knife, Dave.
Yeah, you never know. But when we started doing those Oz Comic Cons in the early 90s, the same thing. We'd all be sitting in the bar, the Southern Cross bar in the Sydney Hilton, where it was being held, and some of the punters who would. And if you ever go to a convention, guys, hang around in the bars where the professionals are. That would be my suggestion, because they will talk to you. And we actually had people that'd come over and they'd ask a few questions. We'd say, sit down, have a drink. And then we'd be chatting for maybe quarter of an hour, 20 minutes. And then, the conversation kind of reaches its natural conclusion. And then they'd be going, oh, well, thanks for talking to us. And they started to get up and go, where are you going? I mean, we're here for the evening, and people would just wander around the bar, and you could be chatting to Archie Goodwin or, whomever, and there was no hierarchy, no sense of, well, we're up here, you guys are down here, and so forth. And
for sure,
to my mind, that really should be how it works.
It's not like that anymore. I hate to be that guy.
San Diego again, because last time I went, it was a zoo.
It's insane. So most people are really cool, but it's very different. Like, I talk about Australia being a gift to comic books right now. You know what I mean? Because it's very true, especially with the story you're just talking about right now. You get to go have fun, shoot the shit, have a beer. Well, now, if you were to go, and I won't drop names, but it just, we do a lot of big shows in Florida, so you go down to Florida, you go to MegaCon, you go to Comic-Con, whatever. So you're down there. There are cats that are well beyond wanting to speak to people. You know what I mean? They're, hey, are you are you a handler? If you're not a handler, we don't want to talk to you. You know what I mean? Can you go get us food? Can you do this? Can you do?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's a lot of it. It used to be like when the smaller shows, you can go and you can have a beer. Somebody will stop at the bar, sit, and you'll buy them a beer. Just to have a conversation. Hey, how's it going? Da 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 da. But you get these guys that have been doing it for 60 years, because in Florida, that's where they retire, truthfully. You know what I mean? That most of the time, that's where you see these cats. And a lot of them are just, they have too much going on to be bothered is the politest way that I'll put that, But if you get guys that are in, that got into the industry in the 90s, in the early 2000s, they're all so cool. You know what I mean? It's so cool to have conversations with people. I think the last guy that I sat and had a conversation with that was really, really cool, is almost done doing shows, was George Perez. He was a lot of fun to hang out with. Really, really nice guy, but he lives in Florida, and, you'll see those guys there because that tends to be where they end the line. You know what I mean? The shows end there. They do their last real big shows there, because California has gotten to the point where San Diego has turned into more of a pop culture event. You know what I mean? Same thing with New York. It's become more of a pop culture event than a comic.
They're all there to do deals with Hollywood, and
absolutely.
It's impossible to catch up with anyone for a drink because they all had to do lunch or do a meeting, it just wasn't what it used to be. But I remember we used to sit around singing Kumbaya, at 3 a.m. just to piss off everyone.
Mr. De Vries, can I ask you 2 questions?
Yeah, sure.
Now, my favorite writer, American comic book writer, is a man that you seem to be very good friends with, Mr. John Ostrander. I have hundreds of his comic books, everything from very early Suicide runs through to some magnificent stuff. He's done all over the place, Batman's, anything you name. What is he like as an individual? Is he a good sport? Because I don't shatter my dreams here, man. Because you know, because it's like I'm already getting to talk to you. But is he a really good dude? Because he seems social media wise and stuff, and creatively to be like on a really high level. The next thing I'd like to ask you is how am I being correct in the number of issues of Southern Squadron? How did you get through 26 issues of Southern Squadron? Because I am currently getting through 4 or 5 of my own comic and wondering, whoa, I think I've dug this hole deep. So I'd like to just I'd like to just ask you those two things, mate, if that's it all.
Well, in the case of John, I've never met a nicer guy in my life. I rate him as a very good friend, and the assistance that he gave me in my career can't be overstated. The first thing I did for DC was creating the Captain Boomerang origin story, which was huge. That got me into DC Comics. He introduced me to all of the DC editors. He introduced me to Dan Raspler, who that was the first Green Lantern story I did, where John had created this really badass Green Lantern called Jack T. Chance, which is the name of the John Wayne character in Rio Bravo, I think it is. And he said, wouldn't it be fun if he went up against Lobo, because people had been sort of suggesting a Lobo story with that character. So they asked me if I'd like to write that. Kim Yale, his then wife, became the editor of the Star Trek line, so I did some Star Trek stuff. When he moved over to do stuff for Valiant Comics, he introduced me to Bob Layton and the guys over there, and Glenn and I did a lot of stuff for Valiant. Another person who was very helpful was actually Todd McFarlane. Todd was a friend of Mike Grell's. I met Todd very early on. I used to go up and visit him in Vancouver Island, and he put me onto an editor who he was working with, who's Fabian Nicieza, who went on to write and co-create the Deadpool character. Fabian was the editor who hired us for the Phantom for Marvel.
Awesome.
John would, when we stayed with him, I pretty much stayed with him every time we went over to New York. He lived in Connecticut, which is sort of like a little bit like a suburb. It's a state, but it's effectively the southern part is a suburb of New York City. He would like he heard that we were really, I was a big fan of Walt Simonson, so he got Walt and Louise to come around one evening and, just hang out. And
dude, I think right now you must be the luckiest man alive, because you're name dropping people to me that when I was like 12, 13 and 14 were absolutely blowing my brains. My mum and dad would be like, Leigh, why are you passed out on the floor? Have you seen this comic book by Walt Simonson? That Thor run he did, man, like back in the...
I got into that originally because he turned Thor into a frog, and I thought, and then having read that, I went back and then started the run and went all the way through. The other person was Mike Grell. He was incredibly influential in helping us meet a lot of people. Like Jerry Ordway, who was at the time working with John Byrne on Superman. Mike spoke to him and said, would you like to do a cover for the Southern Squadron? And he just did. So when we went over that first, the first San Diego Con, people kept saying, Jerry Ordway's looking for you. And we eventually caught up with him halfway through the first day, and he had the image, and he just done it. It was unbelievably good. And they didn't do it for money. It was just he just liked the idea that, hey, wouldn't it be cool to do an Aussie superhero? Because to them, Australia was this, the other. Well, it is the other side of the world, but didn't mean it. They didn't know anything about us. So Mike did stuff for us. The number of people I introduced us to was just unbelievable. But John, just his friendship, his kindness, he is. I'm one of his Facebook friends, so I guess we sort of talk like that quite a lot. When the Suicide Squad came out, the last movie, he did a few interviews where he talked about, my involvement with the Captain Boomerang, which was kind of a lot of fun as well. So he's very keen to sort of share the love, which I thought was great. So if you ever get a chance to meet him, he is just like an Aussie, and he actually loves the Australian sense of humour. He loves having beers. Just an amazing guy. What was your other question? That was the...
Yeah, how did you get through 26 issues of Southern Squadron, Dave?
Yeah, it's...
what advice have you got for us guys sitting at the kids' table? What drove you to get through it?
Well, the numbering didn't get up to 26, but there was probably all up maybe 50 books that had the Southern Squadron in them at some point, be it both Australia and the US. The way it happened was... and we're sort of touching on this before, that one of the other things that Cyclone did well was that we had these 4 characters or groups of characters, but very quickly we all decided we wanted to work on each other's characters. So Southern Squadron was set to appear in the Jackaroo and vice versa, and to the point where by book 8, the stories were just so mashed together into one sort of continuity. It was almost like a mini Marvel Australia type setup that Gary said, why are we even dicking around? Let's, I'll draw you right, and we'll just do Southern Squadron, and we'll just let them take over the title. And then after that happened, then the Jackaroo then was spun off into his own title, and then Tad came back from, he was upstate doing DJing at the time. He came back to Sydney and then decided he wanted to get into publishing the Dark Nebula, so that spun off. So we had all these sort of books spinning off. The Southern Squadron would then appear in the Dark Nebula books and vice versa. And then other guys like Bo Dean, he's now known as Bo Jardine. He was doing a book called Nightside and the Rock. So we decided to do a crossover with them. And then he had another character who was like a werewolf, Ranfany Curse. And so they did a crossover with him. We'd met the guys from Nicketat Comics in America who did Boris the Bear, so we did a Southern Squadron Boris the Bear crossover. So that was a bit of fun. The Munden's Bar one we've already spoken about. So a lot of it was pretty much doing back then what we're doing now, is saying, okay, well, the way to get the characters out there is to allow them to. It's almost like giving them away. You share them rather than sort of hold them tight. You allow other people to work with them. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to work with Rob, and also to have the Southern Squadron in the Torn comic, because that sort of carried on that spirit of, the crossing over and so forth. And Gary Della's quite keen for the continuity of the Southern Squadron to weave into Torn and vice versa. Rob and I, we created this bunch of villains, and we sort of agreed that they're common property, so he can use them in his comics, I can use them in mine. There's, and I like this sort of idea that Gary's doing with Reverie, where while it's not Cyclone, it's got that same spirit of, let's create this big world where all of the characters are interconnected. They can all play with each other and have fun. And part of my motive for getting back into this, it almost sounds a bit grisly, but at some point I'm going to cark it. And I thought it'd be really nice if the characters lived on past my lifetime, that, when I'm gone, they then enter the public domain, and then people can, I don't want them to be, locked up for 70 years afterwards. I want people to use them. And so a bit of my motive right now is to try to re-establish the characters and sort of set the ground rules, which, as Rob said, are pretty thin or pretty loose. But there are some things I care desperately about, and the rest is up for grabs. And I'm hoping that, over time, other writers will start to take the characters. I'm hoping at some point Rob decides to, just put the characters in his own stories. And then, Leigh, it grows from there. And so you kind of let the characters spread far and wide without having to do it all yourself. So that's probably the very long answer to the short question.
No, sir. No, that's perfect. I mean, that's like sharing with everyone. I mean, that's the community thing. That's what I'm enjoying about the whole, like what I've gotten out of what, in my short time in being in the Australian, comics and stuff, is just the sense of community, mate. The communication, the people that, as you said before, like legends like yourself, like are available to come on and yarn and have a talk and, like share their stories with people who, are listening. And myself, like, I mean, I'm so much more relaxed now that I've got to meet you, because I've got to be honest with you, mate. Like, there's a bucket under this table in case I was going to be crook. Like I was real nervous this morning. I got to tell you, and it's like I was like, oh. So no, thank you.
No, look, I can't speak for the others, but I'm reasonably sure that Gary and Glenn and Tad and all of the people from our era, we're just so excited that this is all getting a reboot, and it does feel like a renaissance that in the last year or two, and I suspect Reverie's had a big hand in this, but the whole idea of Own an Indie, that's how long's that been going? 3-4 years?
Yeah, right. I've only heard about it the last couple of years, yeah. And
Kickstarter, which like 2 years ago was something that you kind of heard about a bit. God, you can't go on Facebook or any form of social media now without being absolutely bombarded with all these opportunities to spend your money on Australian comics. I think that's it's a terrific thing that we've got going. I love this drawing, drinks and drawing on Friday night. I think that's terrific. Yeah. Getting people to sort of engage, sharing characters, and I just think there is this sort of sense of that rather than just a lot of people sort of kind of hugging everything close to their chest and doing it all by themselves, there's a sense of getting out there and doing it together, and that I think probably was, going back to the Cyclone era, was what was the advantage that we had, was that we weren't doing it on our own. There were other people. There were the Fantastic guys, the Reverie guys, they were all doing their thing as well. Phil Barlow, all these, really interesting creators, and we all sort of talked and we all, communicated, and it was great.
Yeah, well, it's been awesome, Dave. Unfortunately, your time is up, but I personally want to thank you for. We talk about community and not only my fellow newbies like Leigh and etc. being so welcoming to all of us being a community together, but you guys as the veterans, yourself and Tad and Bo, really just I'm speechless, because I come from music where everyone was fighting for the headline spot, fighting for the gigs, fighting for money. No one was friends with anyone. You played, you left, no one supported each other. And then come into comics, and not only are all us the new guys looking out for each other, but the veterans are looking out for us as well. It's really cool.
Yeah, and there's so many guys like Jason Paulos, you should definitely get him on. He with Hair But the Hippo, fantastic stuff. Dave Heinrich, there's so many of these guys who were, just doing stuff at the time. And all of them are still sort of interested in the comic scene. And there's some great information and knowledge out there that I know these guys would just be only too delighted to share. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much, Dave.
Thank you for hanging out with us.
No, look,
thank you, Dave.
I've enjoyed it.
All righty. Well, we'll catch you down the road.
Yes, sir.
I nearly ended the whole broadcast. I'm hoping I'm pressing the right buttons. Yeah. How cool.
Man, I was about to flip. How awesome is that?
Oh, yeah, wow. Champion.
Yeah, you're flipping. I'm like, whoa. Okay, I got to get myself together. Where's my makeup? Wipe that sweat away.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, it was a daunting thing to get on a phone and try and talk story with a guy who's been there, done that, with stories that are top class, worked for everyone you can name, and but couldn't be more welcoming and more supportive of my nonsense, and yeah, it's awesome.
It's super awesome, man. Congratulations. You get to work with somebody so cool.
Yeah. But we have to keep moving. So we've got someone else waiting. So now you guys probably don't know this, but I used to work at McDonald's back in the day. Now we're going to bring on someone who worked for KFC. the enemy.
Team Shook.
But he didn't flip burgers like I did. This was a gentleman who actually did animation for a Japanese KFC. This is a guy who's done more books than you can name. He's an illustrator like no other. He's an animator. He's worked for the Mouse House. His name is Alex Major, and he is our major guest coming up. Hey, Alex, how's it going, man?
How are you, sir?
Oh, yeah, no worries. Hey, I just need to correct Rob and just fact check him. It was actually a Chinese KFC. So.
You were close.
Right.
Similar squiggly lines, but different.
Yeah. Right. Now I'm in all kinds of trouble.
But actually, Rob, I'm also I'm one of them both side trader type people. The first people who gave me money for doing work was McDonald's.
Hey.
I wasn't good enough to flip burgers. I only did fries and clean the floor. And then one time they did not know what to do with me, so I was literally just pouring drinks in cups. And after 3 months, I had enough money to buy a PlayStation, and I just quit. I mean, I just fired myself. And I was also the first white kid to have a PlayStation in my school because I had to order mine from Japan because it still went out in Sydney. So,
right.
So that was a bit. That had to help out as well. So it was
You're a dedicated PlayStationer, mate, from the sounds of things.
No, I sold it. I sold it after a while, and
Did you make a profit?
I don't think I lost too much because I bought a bunch of bootleg games from this little place, some dude from East Asia. I don't want to stereotype, but he had a bunch of games coming in from Hong Kong, and so I had to put a little spring in there because it was piracy in the 90s. And and then eventually, so I think I sold it for about as much as I bought it. But the reason that I sold it was actually to figure out what I want to do in the rest of my life, and that was to be a poor person drawing cartoons.
Fair enough.
Because I figured, who needs a house?
And how did that work when you decided that that's what you wanted to do? What was your first anything? How did you make anything start going?
What I did was I sent out a bunch of a friend of mine in high school, Ray. He was a really good artist, and he took me to my first Comic-Con. And I was more of a cartoon video game fan before, but I looked at comics, and then I was like, oh yeah, I can do that. And then so I submitted to pretty much all the US companies, and they said, nah, you can't. And then I went to the US for a year as an exchange student, and then I got more interested in it, and then I came back, and then I did my first self-published comics just back in the late 90s. I think it was Keyline it was called Keyline, but then I kind of transformed it to Naomi and Poggy. So anybody from the late 90s, early 2000s might know some of my work from there.
Yeah, awesome.
But I found a news agent, a distributor that would put it into news agents. So it was me and Dollboy, I think, at the time. So Scott, so if you guys remember that, Scott Fraser was doing that. He's a very nice dude. And then Phosphorescent Comics came out. So this was like during the lull period. Like you had all these really cool, like Issue 1, Platinum Grid, Greener Pastures, and they kind of slowed down. And then there was this like lull period. So that's when I was doing comics. I figured get in.
That was a huge deal to get your book into newsagents back in the day.
Oh yeah.
I thought I was already set for life. Turns out I wasn't. But because you print too much, they throw a lot of it away, all the unsold stuff. And then basically the distributor told me, I hope you have enough money to print for about a year, because you'll be going through this, like, show me this like little loop where you start off with high orders, and then after 6-7 issues, it's going to be super low. And then if you can survive 6 or 7 issues, then you can start slowly see a slow rise after that. Yeah. So I had enough money to print 2 comics. And after that, I was like, oh, well, I'm either going to be super famous or not. So I didn't. And then but then Comic Fest started. So you had a little avenue of selling it and all these little conventions. And then I went to do some photocopying at 3 a.m. And the dude was a DJ. And he asked me, if you do a cover for me, I'll let you print. He taught me how to use the Kinko's machines, and I was just printing comics for free. And I did probably like about 8 or 10 issues of comics like that I did from pretty much from Comic Fest till Supernova 2007, and then I left Australia. I was like, I need to see the world, so I was just traveling. I've been to before. I mean, there's a lot going on, but I started traveling. I went to Chicago Comic Con in 2000, and I went to Angoulême in 2004 because I'm not a Marvel DC guy at all. I just like comics in sequences. So Angoulême was probably the bigger deal for me. And,
yeah, right.
And I did San Diego in 2008 after living in Korea. I said, I need to do the pilgrimage. And I'll be honest, maybe 2008 was already too late, and I was mighty disappointed with.
Yeah, so when you hit like 2005 and up, it turned into a much larger pop culture convention than comic convention. You know, it was about the movies, it was about the actors, it was about, you know, your TV shows and stuff, you know, who was showing up, who's coming in, who's the big guest, you know, that's big pulls. It's not like it used to be with comic books when comic book guys were the big pulls and whatnot. Like nowadays, you can't even get there as a vendor or as an artist if you didn't have a booth the previous year almost. It's almost impossible. You know, you're booked years out for that event now because they book so much space for these pop culture aficionados. You know, it's a lot different.
Yeah, it is. It is. We did when I was in Hong Kong. I did like I was really weird because like we launched our toy in San Diego, and I was the creator for it. They didn't even send me out for it, so I was a bit bummed because I had like Toynami was doing our US distribution.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys are familiar with them. So, when I went a couple of years later, I went by myself. I was in LA, and then my friend was like, "You're in LA? Why did you come here for Comic Con?" And I was like, "No, I came because I was doing some other stuff there." And then he just got me tickets, so I went to Comic Con. And so last time I went was 2000. I want to say 2019. Yeah, just before the pandemic. Yeah, 2019. I went, and it was still crap for me. Just crowds. Just crowds are difficult to get a hold of people, and I could tell that for people that were doing indie books, like they were struggling because everybody the crowd that was there was just going for all the name stuff. Like nobody wanted to discover new stuff. So I think that like these big cons are a little bit sad for that. Did you find that Alex, the same as well?
You just brushed over that you were launching a toy. Can you tell us about like what that was, how that all came about?
Yeah, I just finished. Because like you know, not to brag or anything, but a TV show in China. So I directed.
That's what we're here for. Brag away, buddy.
So in China, I had 2 careers. I started off in video games, and then I like playing games, but the workflow, I don't like it because it's just it's not straightforward enough. There's a bunch of testings, RAM, and a bunch of stuff I'm not interested in. You have to deal with when you're creating. Like we were dealing with like the developers were like, oh, there's too many frames of animation, and I'm like, what do you mean too many frames? I frame counted it. It was the same count as Earthworm Jim, and then the guy. And this was like an iPhone, and I was like, dude, like the iPhone's a lot more powerful than a Mega Drive. What do you mean you can't put in 16 frames of animation? He's like, I can't, not enough RAM. So anyways, I was just tearing my hair out, and this kind of stuff was too much. And then also just things were changing after testing, and then you need to create new assets and all. It was like just crappy workflow. And then a TV show came about, and then somebody's like, look, does anybody know anybody that's worked in animation before? And I was like, yeah, I do. And then they were like, have you worked on anything famous? And I was like, yeah, Lion King 1.5. He's like, good enough. And then I went into this meeting, and then some Chinese dude.
Just drop these little things. Wait, you worked on the Lion King 1.5 sequel thing?
Sorry? Yeah, I worked on it, but I was just like an assistant
Just like work on
animator.
Lion King. Anyway, next. It's like, what?
Yeah,
No, hang on.
Yeah, it's not the
Time.
original Lion King. It's like 1.5. It's like I did work at
Yeah,
Disney,
like the
and then
straight
like
to
every
DVD
6
thing
months.
or something.
Yeah, and then every 6 months you had a new project. So you just did your part, and it was like the films would be in the studio for about 18 months, and then like whatever department you're in. I mean, Disney was great. I mean, that's another story as well. Because
I did the
I'm the
Devil's
only-
Toilet, and it's like the only thing I talk about. He worked through all these things, and just like, I did this, did that. But
that's
anyway,
20 years. It's 20 years of just ADD career where it's just jumping from one thing to another.
Yeah.
But yeah. So anyway, so that the video game thing led to a TV show. I did that, and then after that TV show, I did Chinese government propaganda stuff, which was awesome. To work, the Chinese government just found me on WeChat and said, and I think they had to make sure that everything I'm doing there is legit. And then afterwards, they said, "Hey, look, we're doing these animations to talk about the Communist Party. Are you comfortable doing stuff like that?" And I'm like, "Hell yeah, I am. This is funny. Like, there's like a full Chinese experience. So bring it on." And then so I had to design this like Cultural Revolution kid, and he's just talking about how Mao's awesome, how Xi Jinping, and how there's a lot of other governments going on. Like, I've learned all the stuff about the Chinese government I never did the 8 years before because I'm not inclined. I'm not a political dude. So I just thought it's a funny experience. And then after that, the studio I worked for collapsed because like I was also not just anime. I was running this animation studio, and I'm not a business guy. And I was just like the creative dude, and then like I had just like because I had like 40 staff, I had to deal with the our main TV show, and then like eventually we had to find projects as well too because I figured once you do a TV show, you direct everything, everybody's just gonna come up to you, and the sad reality was that it was nothing like that. It was pretty depressing. Hello, somebody's cat said hi.
That's actually my son, which is so weird.
Oh, sorry. I'll let you go. I was expecting somebody to bring up a cute. No, I know my cats are not. They don't. He'd be scratching the door trying to get out.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I ended up so after all this, I was just looking for work, and then a friend of mine introduced me to a toy company that was a Hong Kong based company, and I kind of wanted to leave China because I've done like 8 years in China, and my partner is not Chinese, I'm not Chinese, and I've seen all the people that have stayed in China for too long, and it's not because like like when in the moment it's great, like there's just always work, parties, celebrity stuff going on all the time. It's great, but I've seen that just gets cut, and then when it gets cut, you're on your own, and it's pretty. The government, there's no safety net there. So I told Ica, I said we need to kind of move to a country that's more westernized, and then so. A job opportunity came up in Hong Kong, and it was a toy company, and they just do OEM. So they did all these like Cartoon Network and DC Comics toys. Like there's like these plush Batman and stuff like that. And then they also did Toynami toys as well. So that's the Toynami connection. And then so they wanted to create a new character, new specific bear. And then I created Spud Bear for them, and I created little friends. Like one of the cats is based on my actual cat. And then, so yeah, we went there, and then it went all good. But unfortunately, it's just a manufacturing company, so there was like no marketing going on. But we did do Supernova. I told them to come out to Supernova, and Daniel was really cool because I used to do the commercials for them, so he gave me some space because like my boss just didn't want me to fly around with the bear. But I said, look, I've got free space, I've got free accommodations, Australia, stay at my dad's house. So he flew me and his son over, and we sold the bear a little bit in Supernova, and then we also just to see what the Western audience, how they react to it. And turns out like 20-year-old ladies, white ladies, like the toys best. I said we should target them, and I said no, we're targeting Asian kids learning English. So anyways, a lot of ideas didn't work, so I left the company. But they did do a San Diego Comic-Con launch because of the Toynami link, and I said, "Don't do it." I said, "Your toy's not ready for Comic-Con," and yeah, so we just had like this big thing, this big 2-meter poster hanging in Comic-Con, and I wasn't even there to enjoy it. So it's kind of it sucked. So and
You
it's not
don't have one of the toys there you can show us, do you?
No, my toys are gone in another room, so I'd have to leave for about stuff. And then,
that's right.
I want to read the Alex Major book. I want to read your autobiography, man. Have you started that yet? Like, I mean, it's got this weird sort of James Bond vibe, but he's a cartoon.
No, but it jumps, man.
You know, super sleuth. Just I'm zipping in between countries, man. I'm hustling. I'm doing this stuff. I'm making toys. I'm making comics and animation. It's like, whoa. This is
it'd be you couldn't follow it because there's a bit in there where I'm in Scotland for a couple of weeks working on a film, and then it made no sense. And then I'm in London for another 2 or 3 months at a school at the National Film and Television School, just helping out students with their films. And then I'm back in China. Randomly. Well, not randomly. I'm just going for a divorce, and then I end up in a town called Suzhou I never heard of because I went there. They told me, oh, it's a suburb of Shanghai. A friend of mine, if you're ever in China and you need help, I'll help you out. So I'm in China, I needed help, and he's like, yeah, sure, come in. And I'm flying from Shenzhen to Shanghai, and I'm thinking I'm going to this suburb of Shanghai, and because the prices in 2008 were still super low, so I went on the bus, and it was like 80 RMB, which is still £8. And I was like, oh yeah, £8 for a bus ride from the airport doesn't sound crazy. But I was on this bus for like 5 hours going to another town. And I was like, where did all the skyscrapers go? It's like this weird brown grayish farmland. And then later on, I'm like, I asked the dude because at the time I didn't speak Mandarin. So I was like, dude, Suzhou, yeah. And then he's like, nods yes. So I'm like, all right, cool. Now I could have asked him proper full sentence, go like, oh, boy, woman, Suzhou, man. And he'd be like, your accent's horrible, man.
No, my damn cat's here.
That cat. It's a big one. You got a big cat.
I don't have my laser pointer on me.
You're lively. So, Alex, what are you working on now, bud? I know you're part of the Comics Presents crew.
Yeah, so I'm doing comics
coming up soon.
Yeah, because I wanted to do that because, I missed back in Australia, and my first thing to get into the artistic field was through comics, and it's just a way to kind of get back. I moved back to Australia now after 13 years, so this is a way to move back. And then actually my most work that I do now is I work for a comedian called Felipe Esparza. He's a Mexican-American comedian. He's like regular at the Comedy Store. So I work with a bunch of comedians there. So I work with Jesus Trejo. I did a job with Jamie Kennedy and a couple of other guys. Like Jesus was on the Tonight Show recently on Fallon. So I don't know. So if you follow comedy, they're pretty, they're funny dudes. So I work with mostly Felipe. So I just finished a big project with him. I don't know. They'll talk what it is more about later. But I did a long animation, and I did just like commissions and stuff as well. So that's keeping, paying some of the bills. And I'm still looking for a more permanent thing. But I've just been lazy. I get like these little things in my inbox, and so I've got that piled up. So I promised myself once I go through that pile of work, I'll try to find something a little bit more stable. But I do mostly animations. So like if you go to on YouTube, you look at Felipe Esparza cartoons, you find my animations there.
And tell us about you got banned from TikTok for a little girl.
Yeah, TikTok sucks, man. Yeah, I got a TikTok. I'm really bad on social media. Like, I don't have crazy numbers at all on most of the stuff. So, like, even on my Instagram, I don't have that many followers, but I'm super blessed that I've got like people with blue ticks next to their name DMing me for commission. I've done stuff. So the type of people that follow me are awesome, but it's not a massive number. But on TikTok, I have now 75,000 followers on that. And then like some of my videos, like I've had one of my videos already pass 1 million views. And then I have another one that's on the verge of passing 1 million views, and I've got like a ton that have now like over 100K views. So like now if I get 10,000 views, I'm like, that's a bad video. So my TikTok numbers are pretty good, and like all these kids are complaining, and so I love it. And but I don't know why I got banned for like about a week. And then like I get some of my videos, like I've got this, the girl fighting gets reactions, but I actually get banned for a mermaid that I do.
Okay, and what's the mermaid getting up to?
Nothing. She eats fish and farts them out. Or shits them out, I don't know, whatever. But that's it. But actually it was called she gets pulled, and I kept sending a message to them going like, why are you guys pulling this video? It's just a mermaid eating a fish. Like I was like, this is you know, this is my thing. Like whatever. And then they told me eventually the next time they banned her, that said that it's sexually explicit material, even if it's a cartoon. And I'm like, she's got band-aids on her nipples, so there's no nipples going on.
Okay.
And then I have like a little side account, and that one's not doing that well. But even on that one, I only got like 100 something followers, and then I just posted up there to see what it does, and it got banned on that as well. So I'm like, I don't know which part of the TikTok algorithm is going on, because like I see all these ladies being like superly overtly sexual, and I'm like, they still got like 1 million views, and I'm like, my mermaid eating a fish is apparently
well, it's cannibalism, because a mermaid eating a fish, they're of the same. Yeah, that's probably what it. Yeah,
but it specifically said sexual. She's not like
Alex Major cannibal. That's the headlines tomorrow.
No, yeah, but it says that, but
that's the sequel to Alex Major, the story.
Yeah. So my TikTok stuff, but now it's running okay. But my last 5 videos are bombing big time. So I don't know. Maybe my TikTok career is over before it started, but I don't know. We'll see. I'll probably be like it could be another video that goes viral, and then people will go to the other ones. But
Alex, I've had limited time on TikTok, but I would rather see your career continue on TikTok than some of the other buffheads that regularly get on there, mate, doing stuff. I can tell you, I would rather watch the paint dry on a wall than give time to majority of these talentless hacks that pop up on TikTok for 10 seconds to, you know, dance and carry on and do whatever they're doing. It's like, oh god, here we go. But then someone like yourself who's throwing it out there, you know, like this is what I do, or this is how I draw, this is the characters I'm doing, I want to use this as an opportunity to show myself and my wares, and they suddenly go and, you know, give you the old stamp, bang, banned. It's
Leigh, I'll give TikTok a little bit of a defense here. There's another Australian guy. He's an actor, but he also animates, and he just does these little voices. He does a little super banal video, like of a fish, not fish, sorry, like a bird just walking around, and then he'll animate like hands and stuff, and he'll animate his beak, and it's really clever. It's just pretty basic, but really cleverly done. And he's now on 500,000 followers. And there's a lot of people doing creative stuff. Unfortunately, yeah,
the creative stuff I don't have a problem with. I see it as a great platform to get yourself out there. What I'm just talking about is when someone, you know, takes a video camera of their mate falling over dead drunk on a Saturday morning, you know what I mean, whacking that up for like 10 seconds, and suddenly it gets like 50 million views. It's like, it's like.
But that's Australia's funniest home videos, or the American funniest home videos. So,
absolutely.
But, yeah, I mean, the thing is with most of those apps, like they track you well enough to figure out what you like. So eventually it becomes, you know, it kind of like after now I've been on it for a year, it's now pretty much been, it curates content in a way that I like. So it's usually mostly creative stuff that goes on there. So now I see a lot of other creatives on that platform, which is better. And then some of the dancing they do, there's the ones that's like absolutely nothing, or just the worst ones for me are the ones where people just talk their opinions about it. And I'm like, you have 1 minute to get a super complicated thing. Make sure you tell Comics he missed a lot.
Oh, the boss is back. Oh no! Better to beg for forgiveness than ask for permission. You know?
Yeah, so we're not allowed to call him Sizzle anymore. Is that correct?
Oh,
Oh, I think we are. I think we're good. We're just going to
I think
popularize
you're
it.
right.
Yeah, because I kind of like the idea of him because like Sizzle suits him. I'm like, oh, Sizzle, I get that. I don't know, Dustin, did you hear that Shane's nickname is Sizzle? Like he used to be in high school, and then he's tried to hide it, but then it came up in yesterday's drink and draw.
No, I don't. I made an Uber error today, so I will be the last person that teases anybody about anything. Let me tell you. So, yeah. This morning wasn't great for me. Had to posted something. I had to make sure I deleted it right quick on accident, and it wasn't right quick. It was like 40 minutes later. So, God knows how many people saw my daily screw up. So I'm definitely not going to talk about the Sizzler. You know.
It's okay. It looks like Shane's cool with it. So it was going to be Shane Sizzle from now on, and Rob Lizzle.
Yeah,
it gives him a real superhero sound, doesn't it? And here he is, Shane Sizzle, and arms and shoulders, yeah, like flying through the screen and stuff like that. Like I totally see Shane Sizzle working.
Yeah. So anyways, so going back, Leigh, I think that just like the story, like it sounds interesting, but it looks like a preview of stuff. But because like from point A to point B, it's so all over the place. I think it'll be a very difficult read because people will be reading it and they'll be like, wait, where is he now? It's like, what's he doing in Scotland? And then like, oh, he's teaching in Korea now. Because like, I mean, I think that was like, I want to say I haven't, like you guys said, I did a lot of comics, but I actually didn't do much since I left Australia. I only done 2 proper comic books. One was when I was in Korea. I was just documenting a little comic strip of my experience teaching English, and I put that into a little book. And I did only printed 100 of them. I took them to Comic-Con in San Diego, and I was looking to see if Slave Labor or Ernie Press or one of those guys would be interested. And then all I got out of that was Kitchen Sink Press put me in a mailing list, so I still get stuff from them to selling me books that aren't mine. And and then there was like some of the Korean expats. Another guy did that was like said, "Oh, this book's great. Like we can all relate. You should print more, and I'll sell them for you." And I was like, I was like, if it's not Diamond distributing it, don't want to get involved because elitist that way. But it's kind of stupid in hindsight because more people would have seen that book and it would have been fun. But yeah, that was that. And then for the toy company in Hong Kong, I recommended that we do, because I wanted to do all these animations to promote it, and I've done a couple of animations for them, but I said animations take a long time. I said, how about I do comic strips, and then we'll just gauge people's reaction to the comic strips. But so they let me do enough to do one book, but yeah, and I put that together. So when I went to Supernova, I actually had a book with me as well. So that was the last comic book I've done. So don't need to ask me that question. Like, well, what's the last book you've done?
No, but mate, you got a great story regardless. And I mean, even though we're here to talk about comic books as well, but I mean, like, just mate, you've continued with your animation. You've moved it forward in your area of stream. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it's obviously gotten you places to where you want to be and stuff. And mate, you've got a very interesting story there. I'm not trying to give you any curry about writing the book or anything. I'm actually, mate, it's very interesting to see all the patterns and where you've gone, mate, in life and where your art has taken you, mate, and that's essentially what we're here for. Is like, started off as a young fella wanting to do comic books, mate. You had a crack at it back in the late 90s and stuff, and then you just took it to the next level. I want to do this, I want to do that, and you veered off, mate. You know what I mean? And the last 20 years sounds like an absolute whirlwind from what you're talking about this morning. I can say that. It's like, wow. So to me, success, like with everything you've done, mate. And and now you're back. It's the rebirth. You're kicking it in. You want to get it back out there and dabble back into the comics and stuff like that. Man, I've seen your work because, like, we've shared Friday night drink and draws, a few times now, and had yarns and stuff. And you can certainly play, mate. There's no doubt about that. Slouch. So onwards and upwards for you, my friend. And I can't wait to see what you do over the next few drink and draws. Because yeah, like it'll be.
Well, I had
great
to
see
skip
what
one.
you
I had to skip one because I was just had a massive confusion with Hungarian social gatherings. So at last minute changed things. So I feel really bad about that.
There's plenty more, mate. There's plenty more.
That's okay. I made up
Fridays.
for it yesterday. I went last minute. Sizzle asked me if I want to get online, and I'm like, on 5 minutes notice.
I love the fact it's just Sizzle straight up now. It's like there's no Shane. Shane doesn't live here anymore. It's Sizzle.
So, Alex, one last thing before we let you go.
Yeah.
Way back when, your first comic, it's a huge thing. Like, of all the huge things you've done, one of the first huge things was getting your book on the shelf of the newsagents. What was that like, walking into the newsagents and seeing your book there, I assume next to Phantom and everything else?
Well, I'm trying to figure out how, because the distributor had it in 900 newsagents around Australia, and none of them seem to be in Sydney and Melbourne. So
right.
I saw one Macquarie Centre in Sydney, in North Ryde. They had it. It was the only one I've seen it. That's the only place I've seen it in like live, and it was a bit bizarre. It was good, but actually most of the times I saw it when I was self-selling it in comic stores. King's Comics was the nicest one to deal with. So like I went to King's Comics recently, and they only had like some Cyclone comics and Greener Pastures. They had nothing new. So I was like a little bit like, when I left Australia, like they had at the counter, they had all these local comics, and I always used to check them out to see what everybody's locally doing. And when I came back to Australia and I saw that was missing, I was a bit heartbroken, because like I sold them but because at the time I was super supportive, like in the late 90s, like they were super supportive for Australian comics. And it's still, what I liked about it was that when you went to a comic store, King's Comics was always the most premium looking comic store in Sydney. And they were also the ones supporting Australian comics. And like they displayed them in a way where they weren't hidden, but it was still those photocopy comics and stuff. And they kind of packaged it in a way that it felt nice. And that was really cool, because like I discovered comics at King's Comics, and then see that my comic was there. And I also discovered, like, you know, like it was on the same shelf as Platinum Grit, which was my favorite comic at the time. And I was like, oh, that's great. And then Phantom Zone, they sold my comic below the counter, so they sold it like drugs, so you had to ask for it specifically.
Oh, wow.
And I did not like it. And what I did was I sent my friend there to buy a book.
Guy in the
just to
trench
see.
coat. He's coming in to buy Alex Major's comic book. You know, like
Phantom Comics was dodgy because they had some Australian comics there, which is great, but they only put stuff they liked, and they didn't like my comics, because like my friend went in there because I sent him to spy there. My friend Ray, who got me into comics, I sent him in there to spy on them, and he's like, "Oh, have you guys got the latest issue of Kingline?" And they're like, "What?" And like, "Oh, my." He didn't say my. We probably would have said it was my friend, but anyways, he said that I'm looking. Somebody was like, "Oh yeah, I think somebody dropped some comic off," and they looked at him. He's like, "Yeah, this shit we don't want to put on the shelf."
Oh,
so it was
wow.
their own. And King's Comics would pay for the books. They would just buy your books, so you don't have to worry about him selling it. They would buy it, which is great. And then and Phantom would have her own consignment, so they would only pay you for what they sell. And then Comic Kingdom, which is like confusing, but Comic Kingdom, they put one book in there, and they said, if we can sell one book, we'll order 5 from you. So I put the book in there, and I told the next day my friend, can you go to King's Comics? Here's $5. Can you buy my book? and then, so not to be suspicious, my friend bought the book, and like 20 minutes later, I popped in asking if they sold the book, and they're like, yeah. And then they bought 5 books, so they were pretty cool. Like, I mean, I couldn't be any more obvious what I did there, but.
That's awesome.
But so that was more fun. Like the newsagents, one good thing was I did get like some weird fan mail from, I think it was from Townsville or something. Was it you, Leigh?
I don't know. I don't know. I did a lot of things 20 years ago, mate. I could have.
But did you? Well, I don't know. I remember it was something about somebody said something about that my comic would something about mushy peas. I think it was something about how mushy peas are more healthy for your body than my comic book.
No,
That's something you would have written.
Me. That doesn't sound like anything I would have written, mate.
That
I'll
uncomfortable
get on that
laughter.
right now.
Leigh,
I will track that culprit down for you, mate. Lloyd the dog.
Leigh, that laughter seems very uncomfortable, suspiciously uncomfortable. It's like, I would have write that.
Damn, he's tracked me down after all of these years.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Alex Major, it's been an absolute pleasure.
I know. I had a good time too. We should all catch up. Everybody lives there. I hope to catch up with you guys in person and have beers of the alcoholic kind.
Right on.
And Leigh, Sizzle's asking for fan mail. Can you talk to?
No.
All right, man. Well, we'll catch you on the next drink and draw.
Most definitely.
Yeah,
Most definitely.
Continued
I'll see you
success,
guys
my friend.
later.
All right,
thanks,
you,
Leigh.
mate.
So,
Take
Rob,
care.
then Leigh, and Dustin.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah.
Cheers, mate.
Thank you.
Oh, I cut him off just as he
What
said.
a nice guy.
All right,
He is a
Dustin,
nice
who we got?
guy,
Who we
mate.
got
He's a
waiting
hell
in
of
the
a-
wings here?
So Kyle Willis, man, he's an awesome guy. I've known him for several years now. Business partner, great buddy, incredible artist. You guys really got to get him on a drink and draw. He's a lot of fun. He owns the other half of Cowabunga Comics with me. We produce our books together. He's also opening a brick and mortar in Florida right now, which is really exciting too. So, we'd like to welcome him to Comex, man. Great dude.
Hey, Kyle, how's it going?
Hello, Kyle.
What's going on?
Oh, mate, chewing, just talking, just seeing how everyone's going in life, and how we all got onto this screen here.
I like the sound effects that you come with, Leigh. So keep up.
Oh, are you talking about my laugh, or are you talking about my varying voices I throw out there occasionally?
No, you did some sound effects with the.
Yeah.
I'm glad I tuned in.
Well, Kyle, I'll just let you know, mate. I've only got 2, and I've used them up for the show. So.
Oh, all right. Well, it was nice tuning in, guys. Thank you so much for having me. I do, before we get started here, want to say that is the longest that I've ever seen Dustin go live with talking. So I don't know if you guys are wizards or if you worked out a deal beforehand, but holy cow. Crazy. His mouth wasn't even moving. You didn't have him muted. It just.
I'm sure he's saving it up. He's ready to go now. He was saving it.
All right, you rearing to go, brother?
I don't even know how to follow that. Like, I mean,
Dustin Brunel, everybody. Dustin Brunel.
yeah, for sure. Kyle. I met Kyle when I owned a brick and mortar in Florida, and he was one of the first people to come in, and he used to say the nicest things. He'd come in and he'd tell me the nicest things about the shop. And, he'd come in and he'd bring these fantastic pieces of art. He's like, I got this cool thing that I did. Do you check this out? Because we did something different. We would let people come in and paint in our shop, and just hang out and have a good time so they didn't have to paint at home. Because not everybody has a good place to paint. I'm not trying to be rude or anything, but that's life. Not everybody has a safe place to do things. We were one of the few safe places that I knew of in Orange Park at that point in time. Literal safe places, through the city. You could come in if you had a problem or anything like that. And Kyle had just talked to me about all these awesome things, and I started this event called the Rogues Night Out. And thanks. Go sizzle something. Okay? Go on, sizzle something. Whatever. So anyway, I felt like I would pretend to be you tonight, Shane. I wouldn't say anything. I'd just sit over here in my corner acting like I was working. And that's what I was going to do.
I didn't mean to cause a rift between all you guys.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's mad funny that normally Shane doesn't talk, and it's me and Leigh talking all night. So, tonight it made more sense for me not to talk because you knew Dave I wasn't going to hop in the middle of that like some kind of crazy person, because we all said it and we were all thinking it. We were all sitting in the presence of greatness there for 40 minutes. So I wasn't going to say shit. I was going to sit and learn what I could while we were sitting there.
Yeah.
So anyway, but we did this event called the Rogues Night Out, where we would cut off the parking lot, and I would let vendors come in and set up for free. You could come in, set your stuff up, hang out, and do your thing. You know what I mean? And Kyle would bring these amazing pieces in. And I got to know him better like that. And I went through a really rough patch in my life. And he was one of the few people that would reach out every 3 months or so and be like, hey, are you alive? Hey, are you okay? You know, is everything all right with you? You know, and eventually he got me to come out of my house. And so I don't know if you guys know anything about depression, but with me, it was rough. It was real bad, you know, like really bad. And for him and my wife, it took the two of them prodding and poking to get me to actually come out of my house. And it changed my life. You know what I mean? So I'm very thankful to him. I'm thankful to his friendship and thankful to being, you know, my partner in business and a good friend in general. But Kyle stands on his own without me, without Cowabunga, without the books we publish or anything. He's an amazing artist. He's an incredibly talented guy. And it's all old school. Like, it's all old school painting and stuff. Either that or he's doing awesome shit with ballpoint pens. I mean, the guy's just a monster. And I'll let him tell you some of the things that he's done and some of the things he's accomplished.
By all means, keep going. No.
Well, I did a quick Google while we were on, and yeah, so your Instagram is absolutely full of amazing, like, you do like decal stickers and stuff of like
I do,
Venom and Spider-Man. Like,
but all those stickers were never intended to be stickers. It's just pieces of art that people are like, hey, you got to make that into a sticker. And I'm just like, when I got it free, I just go, okay. And I cut it out in Photoshop and I send it to the sticker company and I order, you know, a couple hundred of them and they're available. So it's cool, you know, to have something in the $3, you know, price range for people.
Yeah.
I couldn't always support artists. I wasn't always in a financial place to do so, but I would buy a sticker, but they never had the stickers because it's hard to have a sticker for all the pieces of art you've ever done. You know, it's not easy as an artist to keep everything in stock, you know, and I like to have something in everybody's price range, as they say. You know, you can get something at my table for $1. You can get something at my table for $1,000 and every tier in between. And it's because I don't forget what it was like when I couldn't afford a $20 art print or a $100 sketch. So kind of keeps me grounded.
Even for the kids that come by too, Kyle, you know, like some of the young kids that, you know, pop into these places, they don't have, like, mum and dad don't have a lot of money. It might have been a huge thing for mum and dad to get them into, you know, like these conventions and stuff. So they might only have, you know, $20 in their wallet. And you're right, as a kid, you know, you see something you love and you can't afford it, but you've got that little, oh, get a sticker. And then you'll go and, you know, you'll whack it on your bike or you'll stick it on your car window or, you know, your bedroom window at home and stuff like that. Like, I mean, that's
absolutely.
The
cool thing is if I ever have a younger kid come into my table and they always touch everything, you know, and people freak out. Don't let him touch my stuff. I love it when kids pick shit up on my tables. So I'll pick up a sticker and the mom will say, no, put that down. And I'll go, as soon as the mom turns around to lead him away, I'll give it to him. I'll say, put that in your pocket. I let them have the sticker, you know, because it's what it costs me, you know, 40 cents, you know, when you buy them in bulk, you can afford to give them, they become part of your marketing tools at a certain point. You can afford to give a couple away. And it's fun.
Absolutely. That's an awesome thing, man. Yeah.
Speaking of kids, one of the things that we did at the Rogues Night Out, it was more of an adult-oriented thing. It was after dark. You couldn't really, it was late. It would go into the evening. So we did, I started hosting events at Dustin's shop where for like $15, a parent could bring their kid in for a couple hours and they could, from the table of all the blank sketch covers, they'd pick a sketch cover and I would have any kind of marker, colored pencil you could possibly want. And the kids would have a cool place for an hour or two to sit down with adults. And I'd have my artist buddies in there and all in level playing field. We're all doing a sketch cover and drawing whatever we want in multiple levels of skill, but everybody's having a good time. And I think that was one of the really coolest things about Dustin's shop and one of the things that I miss and I hope to bring to the new brick and mortar that I'm getting ready to open.
Yeah, I've worked in a comic book store for 11 years now. and so I've gotten to see, all the nitty gritty of how that works. And you putting together a store, like, that's an all-consuming job coming up. But one of the keys, I think, to a comic book shop's success is the building a community and making it a safe place, as Dustin was talking about. So, like, that's a huge thing that you're embarking on. Can you tell us a little bit about, like, your, I guess what inspired you? I guess maybe Dustin's story inspired you to get into all that, and what?
Yeah,
sort of
every comic shop and art gallery that I have ever walked in my entire life is a part of the journey to open up my own. So it's actually going to be half art gallery and half comic book shop, Cowabunga Comics and Art Gallery. And half of the art, I'm gonna have studio space there. It's 1,700 square feet, so I'm gonna have studio space in the back. I'll have my own artwork for sale, but I'm also going to have local artists' art. You won't find landscape paintings in the place. It's all going to be, it's going to be a pop culture playground. It doesn't all have to be comic book themed, but it'll all be, movies, celebrities, sci-fi, really, edgy stuff. And it's all going to be painted by local artists. And that's been supporting local and independent artists and not just supporting them, but showing them and proving to them by helping them generate sales that what they do has value. And I want my store to continue to be a part of that journey. I can't tell you how many times I've had an event where an artist sold their first piece of art ever. And they'd go to Art Walk and set up. They didn't know how to talk to people, and they didn't, there's no handbook on how to be a, artist. A lot of people go to an Art Walk in any city and they think, oh my God, they're a card carrying member of the art guild. No, anybody could set up a table, and I love breaking down that wall and showing anybody, you can do this too. I'm not special, I just work at it,
That's what it all boils down to. Is anything you start, it's just work, mate. It's just practice, isn't it? I don't think we've said this before. I don't have a theory on what the right process is. You know what I mean? You just learn through your mistakes and your shortcomings, and hopefully you improve, and eventually you get to where you're at, and you never stop improving. But man, what I really like too is, just from what you were saying about local artists and stuff having their work in your shop. I can remember, like, when I was in school, I was selected to have a painting at the time in Townsville, a small town. But, when you're little and you're like, 11 or so, it's a big thing, these things, And, I just won this art competition, and the Townsville City Council decided to hang this painting that I did in the library. The library in the city, along with like 3 or 4 other young guys in school, young ladies, artists, And man, I remember that was the first time I'd ever seen anything of mine, out in public when I was a little kid. And I still remember the immense feeling of pride and, like that I had with that. I think that your initiative of allowing younger independent artists, it doesn't have to be younger, it can be of any age group, I'm assuming. Kyle, you seem like a totally open dude with that, but that opportunity I mean, mate, that could be a wall breaker for people. Do you know what I mean? Like, just to see their stuff,
it affords people the opportunity to be a part of something bigger than themselves. You're not just a single artist drawing at home on the side anymore. You have art, hanging in gallery fashion on a wall of a local business with your peers and people that you probably think everybody is an artist. We all have that opposite of an ego. What do they call it when you imposter syndrome? So to go into a place and you're going to think everybody else's artwork, is better than yours, and you don't deserve to be there. But after a while, you realize, especially if you could be a fly on the wall and you see other people appreciating your stuff, you go, oh my God, that little tiny boost of confidence sometimes is all people need to go, you know what? Absolutely. Maybe I don't need to take Dad's advice and put this to the side and go get a real job. You know what I mean? Society will beat the creative vein out of you if you let it. So if I can stop that from happening to a single human being, then I've done something with my life.
One thing that Dustin was saying about his store that I thought was fascinating, that people could come and paint there. Can you imagine Leigh and myself are both artists, and Leigh's lonely in his granny flat drawing away, and I'm surrounded by kids who won't give me 2 seconds to draw. Can you imagine being able to go to a comic shop surrounded by comics and just sit and draw? Like, how wicked would that be?
It was a lot of fun, man.
Dream, man. Dream. Wander in there,
Just hang
chilling
out.
out,
Yep.
talking to people, man, that are a lot, like-minded sort of stuff, like that's what I think everyone needs, mate. There's people to communicate with, and that once you communicate with more people, you tend to find yourself getting a voice. And everyone's got a voice, but you find yourself within, and you start learning confidence by learning with peers and other artists and stuff. It was difficult for me being in a small town because, like the people that owned the comic shop when I was younger, it was a comic book shop in the back of a book exchange, if you know what I mean. And they were older. It was an older family business that had been around from the 50s and 60s. So they were very nice people, but you sort of couldn't walk up to them and talk comics with them. They were only interested in, hi, how you going? There's the comic, ding, ding, like $45 or whatever it is, and off you go, And that notion of just having somewhere to hang out, man, and talk to people about, all the cool, beautiful stuff that's out there. That's
what an amazing icebreaker imagine a kid's an introvert and he doesn't know how to talk to anybody, but he sees that he can come up there and he can buy a sketch cover for $5-6 and he could sit down and start drawing it. Maybe we all want to connect with one another, right? But we don't all have the tools in our toolbox to do so. So what a great icebreaker to be sitting down and illustrating, and somebody, oh man, are you drawing? Is that Captain Marvel? I love Captain Marvel. Now he's got an in, and now he's got a friend, maybe, So.
And we used to have this young dude. Well, he wasn't young. He was older than we were at the time. Kyle. Trying to remember his name. Really sweet guy. He was agoraphobic, and he started coming into my shop when we first opened it, and it was very difficult for him when it started, because he worked from home, never left the house, lived with his mom, and he would come to the shop and he wouldn't even talk to me at first. When he'd come in, he'd pick up his books, he'd come to the counter and he'd swipe his card, take his books and leave. Didn't matter what I said, you know what I mean? Hey, how are you? Whatever, I'm a pretty polite person, so I would attempt to be, as cordial as I could. And by the end of it, by the time we had closed the store, he was to the point where he was sitting in the shop. He would buy his stuff and sit and read in the shop, and it was the most phenomenal thing. And then we started getting more and more agoraphobics in the shop because of the fact that he had like a 75,000 follower Instagram that he would talk on, that he wouldn't talk in person, but he would talk on the Instagram. And I thought that was just the coolest thing. And he gave it to us before we closed the store. And I wish that, I'd have kept in, contact with him and all this other jazz. A really nice guy, always came in religiously on Wednesdays to pick up his books, and he would have his mother drop him off because he couldn't drive. It got to the point where she would drop him off and leave. And it was so cool to see that happen. And I look forward to those stories from Kyle because I don't live anywhere near there now, and to have our business have a brick and mortar is exciting to me. And I look forward to having phone calls where he's like, hey, man, this happened. It was phenomenal. This young dude came in, he sat down, he drew this, and he came and showed me this doodle that he was super proud of, and it's just like powerful, man. There are few things that can move my heart like somebody being positive, and when you hear Kyle talk about the things that he wants to do, that was one of those things where I was so proud of him as a person, as a friend, to go, yes, I will 100% do Cowabunga with you. I think it'll be great. And at the time, it wasn't Cowabunga. It was just some bullshit we were doing, and we were just talking about nonsense. And it was a way as a friend, and don't tell me I'm wrong because I know it's true. It was a way as a friend to get me to come out of my house. So I appreciate that, and I've known for a long time, and I love you for it. But we sat in his house, and he was like, we need to bounce some names off of each other. And I was like, we'll do Cowabunga. And he was like, holy shit, that's a winner. And all of a sudden it was Cowabunga, and he goes, I got an artist that's going to do a logo. And I was like, what? I hadn't even thought we were this far in advance. You know, this was years ago now. This wasn't like yesterday. You know what I mean? And we've built each other up so far. You know, when my uncle died, I felt like I was slipping again. You know, it was about a year ago my uncle died. And it was a really bad experience for me because we had just moved to Tennessee. We were all happy again. And life was coming together for me and my family, you know. And when he died, I was just like, oh my gosh, here we are again. You know what I'm saying? The job that I was working on fell through. He died. I was just like, because I'd been preparing myself. I was moving for a job. You know what I mean? We were going to buy these trucks. We were doing stuff with my dad, and it all fell through, you know. And I remember I called Kyle. I didn't know what to do. I was really upset. And I talked to him. And then I remember I talked to a couple other people that night. I have a couple close friends, you know, very few, but a couple that I cherish as friends. And I remember I thought they were going to tell me I was crazy because I was like, I'm going to write a comic book. And they were just, all of them were supportive, to be fair, you know. But I remember Kyle going, you can do it. And I believed him. Like, I believed him when he told me I could do it. And I was like, I don't know if I can do this, da-da-da-da. And he's like, we've got all this experience in comic books. We can write a comic book, you know. And I put this book together, and Kyle put the cover out, and I remember thinking it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Like, it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen in my life, you know. And I've seen the man's artwork. I mean, I don't toot his horn. I'm honest with him when it comes to his artwork because that's what a friend is, you know. We don't bullshit each other on their stuff. And he sent it to me, and I remember I cried so hard. And it was this image, this homage to Wolverine #1, but it had Gary Lightfoot on his features, you know. And Kyle had reached out to him about doing a review for the book and all kinds of other craziness. And I just thought it was phenomenal, you know. I have a lot of faith in him as a human being. And I think this is definitely the direction that he needs to go because he's more passionate about it than almost anybody else I've seen in anything. You know what I'm saying? He'll go without. He'll work 14-hour days, 15-hour days, and it's just immensely motivating to watch an individual that has been where I've from the bottom, you know, and crawled your way to where you want to be at. And there's a lot of people that give up halfway to 3/4 of the way in, you know, and they don't get to where they want to be at. But it's awesome to see the people that do the struggle, the win, you know, the losses as well, but the win, you know, the overall win is incredible.
And then taking that and creating a positive space. Any donkey with a YouTube show can spend the whole time being a gatekeeper, you know, telling you how much modern comics suck and all that sort of stuff. But you guys seem to be beaming with positivity, which is really cool. And like, speaking of Kyle, obviously getting into making a comic shop, putting it together, you like comics, love comics. So yeah, rather than talk about books that, you know, maybe aren't living up to our childhood standards, what sort of books tickle in your fancy these days? What do you read, like, love, old stuff, new stuff? What are you reading?
Well, I always loved Venom when I was a kid. It was my, you know, Spidey was my first love. Venom was romance, man. I really loved that character. But he never really had a story that blew me away. I just liked the art because I loved Todd McFarlane as an artist, and the art inspired me to get onto the character. But I ended up collecting more action figures over the years. It's embarrassing how many I own. You can't see off screen.
Mate.
But yeah. all right, here we go. It's pretty nuts. So
wow.
All right, yeah. Challenge
but
accepted.
only on the. All right,
wow.
Here we go. Look at that.
Good Lord.
We're all nerds here.
Glory be. I love it.
Nerdy safe space.
But only in the last couple years did you know, Donnie Cates come on and really tickle you know, all the right, you know, places for me to really enjoy a book. By the end, you know, I think he was kind of patting himself on the back too much instead of just writing. He was too worried about his image, but he really changed the way the world looked at that character. He wove in, you know, where the fairy tales of dragons come from into the story, and he wove a really, really intricate web that I'm really glad that I got to read it in time. You know, I'm not picking something up from 10 years ago. I got to read it as it came out. It was nice. I was glad to have a periodical again. You know,
Yeah.
I didn't want to wait for it to come out. I wanted to read each issue as it came out. And I don't really hunt variant covers, but I had to have variant covers, you know, so I'm hunting all the variant covers so the Donny Cates run is good. So many comics that are coming out now aren't your typical spandex and capes, you know? So as far back as when Chew came out, when I first moved to Jacksonville, it was August of 2011. And within a month, there was a lot of breweries here. There's a brewery in a tap room. And there was a dude reading a comic book. And I was like, what are you reading? You know, I hadn't read a comic book, you know, in a while. He's like, oh, it's called Chew. And I was like, what's that about? And I don't know how versed you are with the comic Chew, but it was awesome to, you know, I started picking up the trade paperbacks and reading Chew. And it was fascinating that comics went in the direction that they had. So now recently, you know, Walking is amazing, but I just read couple weeks ago, Basilisk came out, and it's a new take on the post-apocalyptic world, but nobody flying around with the power of the sun.
Yeah,
and that's what's tickling my fancy, is a real cerebral approach. You know, like the listener itself. You know, it's a cerebral approach to periodical floppies, and I couldn't be more in love with it.
Very good.
Wow.
Tell you what, Kyle, Dustin's lucky to have a good mate like you, mate. It's it goes to show in hard times, everyone too, like mental health is an important thing out in the world, and everyone should reach out to a friend and just ask them if they're okay and give them a helping hand, because that seems to be what you're all about with your shop too, mate, with helping those young fellas and people.
He's very generous, and he's very complimentary with his work, but you know, he gets he gives as much as he gets. You know, he's also a good person to have around. But you know, in the world that we live in, you know, people only want to post the best of their day on Facebook and have this image that everything's hunky dory. Everything isn't always hunky dory, and I even tell him, he's always like, every time he does an interview, I tune in and I'm not in 5 seconds. He's like, yeah, we're really excited about that. And I was like, you need to tell people you're irritated about, because they're just going to think you're just the guy that says he's excited about everything, you know? So yeah, for me, I'm definitely not everything's hunky dory on Facebook land. You know, I don't need fake internet points to get through my day. You know, I need to be who I am. I need to be in a bad mood sometimes, and that needs to be okay. You need to, you know, appreciate me for the whole breadth of who and what I am, and not what I am in one moment that turned you off, because I'm so much more than one moment. We all are. So.
Yeah, I tend to try to. I don't know. I guess I worry. I try to keep myself above where I have been, because I have that fear of, you know, I don't know if any of you have ever been medicated, but once you get off of it, you have that fear of going back. You know, you have that fear of sliding back that path. So I desperately try to stay above my own feelings, you know, and it's nice to have friends that will talk you through them and stuff. And, you know, I try to just use Facebook and stuff, social media, as things to show books. And, you know, it's almost like I don't care for social media, and that's why I'm not great at it, right? I'm not the best. I mean, Rob, you follow me on Facebook. Leigh follows me on Facebook. I tend just to post about my books. You know what I mean? Because that's, you know, it's a marketing tool to me. You know, you'll notice my wife very rarely tags me in things. When she does, it's normally my kids in the pool or something like that. You know, but it's this world of, as writers, we all have that deep, dark, dank level of us, you know, where it all comes from, you know, and a lot of people have writing where it comes from this positive place. My writing doesn't come from a positive place. So it's like, if I can keep my own negativity at bay, then I can show you guys the side of me I want you to see. And that may sound selfish, but that's how I carry my own weight. You know what I'm saying? It's just how I deal with my own issues. And I'm so thankful that, you know, we have the show. I have another show, that it's nice to be able to show people the reality. You know what I mean? What's really going on, what we're really talking about, comic books or shops or toys or figures or, artwork or anything else, because we don't have that escape. I have a 2-year-old and a 10-year-old. I don't have that escape. Rob, you're there. That escape is not real. So it's nice to be able to talk to a couple of adults and not be on Facebook. Well, I mean, we're broadcasting Facebook, but not be on Facebook where it's like, hey, look, this is what this is the sales. You know what I mean? This is the job, because it becomes a job, and you use it for marketing. These shows are so real and so fun and so off the take that we can talk about things that are different. You know what I mean? What drives you? Like Battle for Bustle. Man, I can't imagine that comes from a happy place ever. I just can't. And it's such a powerful piece, and we've talked about it before. It's like the coolest stuff comes out of the darkest recesses of your psyche. Like, I've seen Kyle paint some shit that I was just like, what? And it's powerful because that's where the emotion comes from, and that's where you carry it from. To be fair, Kyle does a lot of really happy stuff too. A lot of really cool stuff, from remarks to cards to paintings, and just like Leigh does these massive pages. These massive pages, and you're just like, holy shit, I wouldn't even know how to scan that. I think, but it's cool to see people's different viewpoints of where you pull energy from. It's, I don't know, it's very powerful. Spiritually, you put yourself on paper. So if you're getting dark and dank all the time, let's give you a little bit of light. I remember Kyle telling me once, he was like, don't pitch the listeners bad all the time. You got to have some kind of happy in there. And I remember not knowing how the hell that I was supposed to put happy in the listener anywhere. And I got to this point where I was like, it doesn't have to be happy, it can be uplifting. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't have to be just this like happy and jokes and stuff like that. Can be an uplifting experience. Maybe reuniting with a loved one, you know what I mean? Or finding out someone is okay. Those are also uplifting experiences. Yeah, I don't know.
Mate, I think I'm 100% with you, mate. Like that, I think that people that have an outlet in creativity, and mate, it can be making little aluminium tin can men. You know what I mean? Like, whatever your passion is, whatever you want to do. Everyone needs that outlet. If you don't have that outlet, that is when the walls start crumbling, because you have to, like, a lot of people don't find it easy to communicate. Their communication is what they put into their time, and not work, and not, like when they're asleep, but when they have that time themselves, when they're at their most personal, and that's what they've got. And that can be writing, painting, absolutely any forum that you wish. And I think that people have got to stop being so critical about what that individual's voice or outlet is, and we need to be more supportive. And I love what Kyle's doing. This, the community that even Kyle, we're trying, Sizzle, and our peeps here down in Australia are trying to create a community of people that like can come together and have these communications and stuff like that. And everyone needs a place to reach out. And I think what you're going to do, mate, with your shop is provide a lot of people that possibly are sitting at home, not where they should be, quietly going about their processes. You're going to give them a forum to come in and be proud, man. And that's the the evolution of good mental health, mate, and good art. And,
I hope, Kyle, that when, like, if you think back on this and go, oh wow, the guys didn't let me get a word in for the last 20 minutes, it's straight away like you kind of made us feel comfortable to talk about some of this real talk that we've been talking, which is kind of like the vibe I think you've been talking about that you're going for with your shop. So if you manage to do it here with two bearded Australian guys, in the span of 15 minutes. I can't imagine what you'll get up to with a store with all the time in the world. That's, kudos to you.
I have very few times in my life been as excited as I am for this new branch, this new page to turn. So I'm to quote Dustin, I'm extremely excited.
Yeah.
So thank you for recognizing, that it's a cool thing that I want to fester. I can't wait. I pick up the keys on Thursday. So.
And you got the what do you got to get all
the Friday for you because you guys are a day ahead. So
you got to get all the carpentry and everything done, or?
Oh yeah, it's not going to need a whole lot. If anything, from the business, there was a vape juice manufacturing company in there, and they had a bunch of rooms. If anything, I'll be taking a couple of walls down. But it's definitely gonna be unlike any comic shop or art gallery anyone's ever walked into before, and that's gonna be really fun. It's a lot of space. So, and every inch of it is going to be, you walk into a comic shop nowadays and it looks like they have maximized the profitability of every square foot in the whole place. There's always a keychain or something. You're going to have room I'm going to have a couple of chairs, and community books. You can sit down and read an independent comic, a reader copy, a store copy, if you will, and independent authors can bring their stuff in. For that, but I want to foster a sense of community there, and having a local artist have 3-6 pieces of art hanging for sale at a time gives them a sense of ownership of a business in their community. Something that I wish I would have had as a kid. This is going to be an embodiment of all the things that I want to see in the world. So, and all the things that I wish existed when I was a kid. When I was a kid, the comic book shop was called Sanderson Sports Cards and Collectibles. Where's the word comic book in there? It doesn't exist. This guy didn't he barely sold comic books, but he tolerated comic books being in his sports card store, And I don't want anybody in Green Cove Springs I want their first experience walking into a comic shop as a young kid to be a cool thing. I want them to go for every other comic shop they ever walk into after I want them to go, what the heck is this? This isn't like Cowabunga,
That's
I
awesome.
think that's fantastic. Kyle, you're going to have to keep us, man. You're going to have to keep us updated with this shop and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
We've got some interested people down here that want to see great success come to you, mate. So it's like, we want photos and, come back on the shop and show us some images and that when she's decked out, mate. And, have another yarn and you can take us through the processes of getting it from grounded
For
roof.
sure. Next time we powwow, it'll be from the shop. How about that?
Yeah, that'd be awesome. And me and Leigh will need the address because we'll send you some books to put in the
Right
shelf.
on.
Absolutely. I'll answer from, I'll tune in from the phone so I can walk around and give you all a tour.
We've
that'd be
got
The pictures on the desktop. We'll actually do the virtual tour.
For sure. So before we get into that, though, Kyle and I are actually doing MegaCon in August as well. So we'll be the next time we
12th to the 15th.
Yep. The next time we have him on the show, will be from the floor of MegaCon. So we're really, really excited about that. It'll be me, him, and the Aussie's favorite, Jim Noble. So
Jim.
It'll be the three of us.
How drunk will you guys be for that cross?
Probably pretty drunk.
Okay, awesome. I'll have the warning ready to come across the bottom of the screen.
We're giving viewers a 6-week warning to prepare yourselves.
Yeah, I'm letting you guys know it's going to happen. Now, I probably won't drink because I'm driving, so I probably won't drink. And then at the same time, my wife's not there to make sure I behave, so I'm definitely not going to be drinking. Hey, ask Kyle. Last time we went to a big show together, I went right to bed and right back to the show, didn't I?
Hey, it was your first time. You ease in slowly, but this is gonna be full throttle. So sorry.
It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really excited about it. We've got tables. I don't know. Kyle, we've got tables right next to each other, so we're literally going to be right next to each other. And then the following weekend, not even a full week, the next time that I'm on the show, I mean, it's partly my show. The next time I'm on the show will be from another con in Michigan, like a week afterward. So,
yeah, the following weekend I'm going to be in New Hampshire at the Old School Comic Book Show.
man, we're all over the place. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Oh my gosh, too many shows.
We
But,
need images from everywhere here. It's like, that'd be cool. Hey, Spedsy, when you get off, when you finish the show today and you've got to give Shane like your 2,000 word rundown of how the show went and everything, you know what I mean? Like, throw in there a line saying, we should get Kyle to take a mobile phone out to his, Comic-Cons too and zip us a line every now and then or take photos and stuff.
Funny. Just before you said it, I was thinking I should ask for, like, not that it's my place to say it, but I was going to almost book him in for a progress report live from the store and all that sort of stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah, man. We're more than happy to bring Kyle on whenever he wants to come on or whenever you guys want. I'll make it happen.
Yeah.
So we'll get him on. I'm excited to see what he does with it because I know he's got big plans. He's a really intelligent dude, so we'll see how it plays out.
All right. Well, I don't have to bathe now that I've showered in all of his compliments, but I got to tell the two of you fellas that you guys were fantastic tonight. Thank you for having me on.
Well, Kyle, look, I'll be honest, mate. I knew the first two guests, and so filling in today for Shane wasn't that big a deal. But then I was secretly texting Dustin saying, do you know the Kyle guy? Because I don't know him and it's going to be awkward and I don't know what to say. But I'm happy to report it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, to meet you. And I look forward to talking to you more in the future, man.
Likewise.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. And we will catch you down the road.
That's it.
Good luck with the store, man.
Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you so much.
Dude.
Good luck with everything, mate.
All right.
Mad fun.
I think we did it.
I think you did great, Rob. Come on now. And I only one shook joke all night.
Yeah.
Only one. I made it through the whole night. One shook joke.
I didn't make it about me. I didn't show any of my books.
One thing I will say, and I know he'll be listening, is I was doing a bit of draw and listening to the Friday Night Drink and Draw last night. And that bloody Dave Dye, I tell you what, you were talking about a comic book last night at one point and bang, here it is, and then it's like someone else is talking about another comic book. Hang on a minute. Whack, it's right there. It's like, man, it's like he's got a vortex just to comic books right next to his drawing desk.
I need to put more things just up here because that's where Dave gets all this magic from.
Yeah. That's the magic portal. Yes.
Yeah, for sure. It's in the bottom of a toilet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, I had an awesome time today. So it was great.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, Kyle's awesome. And Dustin, like those sort of things, just to piss in your pocket for a moment, friendship goes both ways. And that dude was freaking cool. And so, straight, like I feel like I know you a little bit, but then getting to meet him, I don't know. Kudos to both of you. Don't take that for granted. Friendships like that are not.
I like you guys a lot.
Really cool.
You know what I mean? I really do. I like you guys as a whole. You know what I mean? It's very like I said, I'm on Facebook and I'm positive all the time because that's how I try to carry myself. You know what I'm saying? And I know the honesty. Thanks, Dave. I know the honesty of showing oneself and whatnot. But at the same time, there are so many people out there and they see so much negativity that I really just want to put that out in the universe. You know what I mean? But I was serious when I said I don't have a lot of I have friends, you know what I mean? But I have my close list of people is very, very short. And I include you guys in my list because you're very, very cool people. You're on the same wavelengths I am, you know what I mean? And it's just when I started talking to Leigh, it was literally like it was like connected at the hip. It was like that guy is me in another country with less hair on his head. You know what I mean?
Take the hair here and put it here.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what I mean?
I had to do something.
It's like an evolution as we get older. You know what I mean? We congregate to people that make us comfortable, and we surround ourselves by people that lift us up. Too many times in our lives, and we may not even realize it, we surround ourselves by people that are not doing our karmic space any good, if that makes any sense. So finding people that can lift you up as a human being, you got to have a buddy or a couple buddies, or those dudes that you have a beer with that can just or just hang out and watch a game or something, you know what I mean? Or fucking play cricket with, you know what I'm saying? There's always a space for those people in your life that can make it not so tough sometimes, and like I said, I spend a lot of time, and Leigh knows, I spend a lot of time in the darker depths of myself writing these books, so it's like, when I put Greed out, it was like, I can put Greed out because Greed's fun and I can laugh and I can enjoy Greed, as I write it, because it reminds me of my son, so it's a very uplifting book for me, even though it's dark as shit. And most people would tell me I'd burn in a church if they ever read my book. It's still fun. It's a good-hearted energies, and yeah, I'm real proud to be on a show representing, the U.S. when there's all kinds of stigmas about it. You know what I'm saying? It's normal people just like anywhere else, so it's awesome to be on a show with people that aren't used to me or the way that I act or the way that I talk or, my accent or this and that, you know what I mean? It's a very interesting concept. But you meet the coolest people, right? Like, we've brought on some really cool people since we started this show, like some really cool people. And I think that says a lot for the show. I think it says a lot for Super Sizzle that he's, brought these people together and whatnot. And I think it's funny that my kids run around saying Shook. You know what I mean? I think it's funny as shit to me. It's just like, if we can, it's not just, we joke about inclusivity. Like, we have got to think as a whole and stop putting ourselves in these bubbles where it's like, oh, Australia's over here. Okay. The US is over there. And that's what's so amazing about this show, because the back and forth and the banter from people from all different places and stuff. Hell, there are people that have been on here that I would do backflips to get to do books with me. You know what I mean? And I like to think that if people read my book, they would be like, holy cow, I'd love to work with him, just because it's a concept where, we talked about it twice this evening, the imposter syndrome. We talk about it a lot, and I don't feel like that when I'm with y'all. I feel like I'm part of the cool kids club. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
It's cool, man. I'm glad you guys got to get a little bit more out of me than you normally do. I'm glad you got to meet Kyle. He's a great guy. And I'm always around, and I'll put it that way. I treat Facebook like it's an umbilical cord. So if anybody that knows me or watches the show or anything like that, or wants to bullshit, or ever just needs somebody to listen to you for a couple seconds, don't feel like you can't reach out. Because I'm always listening.
Just a time, and I'm always the devil's toilet. What? No, damn it.
And I'm always battling.
Bustling.
All right, guys. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
And yeah, we will see you next week. Well, Shane will be back, and yeah. Thank you. That's CCCX for this week.
CCCX.
All right, see you.